Depression with your host, Diva with Depression.
Hey guys, welcome to Breaking the Mask of Depression with me, your host, the Diva with Depression. I told you guys that I would be back. I'm still not 100%, still waiting for tests to come back, but I'm here and I have an amazing guest today. I am not going to waste your time dribbling on about her, but I'm going to tell you this. She is a professional, but she's not your professional. So if you need help, if you're not feeling well, please go get some help because we want to keep you here. So with that being said, please welcome my guest, Miss Shirria McCullough. Hi.
Hi. Thank you very much.
You?
Appreciate the opportunity. I am doing well. Hope you are.
I said it right?
You did say it correctly.
I always go back and I listen to some of my episodes. And I'm like, you butchered that person's name. You butcher my name. So I'm like, okay, So how are you today?
I am doing well.
Very, very good. I want to thank you for coming on because you're a sister and you are a therapist. And that is, I think it's less than 3% of the therapists are sisters. Black women and Black men, actually, to include, I think Black men is even less than that, maybe 2%.
Yes.
And so it's an honor actually to have you on. And okay, listen, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself. What's your name? Tell us your title. Tell us where you're at.
Okay, so I am a licensed clinical social worker. My name is Shirria McCullough. I'm a licensed clinical social worker out of North Carolina. I am multi-licensed in North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland, and Virginia. And I work with millennial ambitious Black women and Gen Z of color, millennial ambitious Black women who are struggling with symptoms of depression and anxiety, trying to manage all of the responsibilities of all of their roles and lacking self-care and boundaries, feeling lost in all of their roles and often feeling like they're failing. And so I work with those women, helping them to, one, redefine themselves as a married woman and a mom to a woman who is married and has children. So helping them to re-explore their own identity and utilize these roles to enhance that identity that they have identified for themselves or rediscovered. And then helping them to find their rhythm in managing all of their responsibilities, create and set boundaries, communicate them effectively, and, improve or cut some relationships to improve their life and eventually their mental health and well-being. And then with the Generation Z population, I am helping them navigate transitions, typically the adult transitions that come with shortly, ending high school, whether that's a transition into the workforce, transition into college, transitioning out of their mother's home, or even transitioning out of college into adulthood, like the real grown-up jobs in life, and helping them define the adulthood the way they want to live it on their own terms and communicate those terms to family members that may be disappointed or may not like, what they feel. Also help that generation redefine their relationships with their parents. Because I think a lot of times what happens is they go off to college and they recognize that the home that they came from or the parenthood that they had isn't normal. And so helping them navigate that and overcome any type of trauma that they may have experienced as a result of that.
That's a mouthful. That is a mouthful. Thank goodness for you.
Thank you.
I love not see yourself as a mom, but a woman with children. I won't include the wife part because I'm not the wife part. But that was me, and it probably still is me, my whole identity being a mom, because that's just like the greatest role that I've played in my life, and I had a shitty childhood. So that's a wonderful way of putting it. I love that. Now, speaking of moms, and nobody's going to believe that you have 5 kids, what are the age ranges?
So my children are 25, she'll be 26 in September. And then I have a 21-year-old, and then I have a 20-year-old male, a 19-year-old male, and a 13-year-old male. Well, he'll be 13 in November. So yeah.
Wow. Wow. So does it help you to be a therapist working with some of those age ranges when it comes to parenthood?
It does. So my oldest, the 26-year-old, is still considered millennial. So we are both millennials, but we're on different sides of it. And then the rest of my children are Generation Z. So helping them they help me to, communicate with the clients that come in, but then also, better understand some of the life situations that they have, their perspective on life situations that are completely different than what my perspective of was at their age. So yes, it does. It's very helpful. And the baby girl, the 21-year-old, she's really good at like calling me out on stuff. So she's the biggest.
Sounds like mine. Yeah, it's always one that just has the mouth. Now, my youngest is the same age as your oldest. As she'll be 26 in January, and she's the one that keeps me in line, with the lingo and what's acceptable and what's not. And I know that I'm not a millennial. I'm much older than a millennial, so there's a big difference in the way I think, and probably even the way you think. With the years difference. But so what made you decide to go into therapy? I know you were social work before.
I was in Child Protective Services. It was kind of a pivot because of the pandemic. In Child Protective Services, I was an assessor, but I was the on-call and the after hours. So I walked into all sorts of cases. There was just a range of like very critical cases, domestic violence, severe domestic violence, child fatalities, but even like pick up this child who ran away to Florida. So it'd be things like that. And during the pandemic, we just lost a lot of resources, and our responsibilities in that role shifted. And it was becoming a struggle trying to manage my responsibilities as a mother and still do that job. So I pivoted out of that into a more clinical role. And I kind of just landed in private practice, honestly, because at the time that just seemed like it was going to give me the flexibility that mirrored being an on-call after hour social worker the most. And my family was having a difficult time with the transition. And so I just kind of like ran into it. And thank God it worked out for me.
So you've been practicing for how long now?
Since March 2021 was when I officially opened my private practice, but I've always done some type of clinical work part-time since I became licensed in 2012.
That's awesome. So do you stick to just women, or have you had male clients?
Funny thing is, I do have quite a few males, and as much as I target to millennial Black moms, I have a lot of white males who come to me. So, sometimes I'm intrigued to see, like, why me? Because that was not for you. And I've had, some that answer, they turn real red in the face, but they just feel like I've actually heard one white man said that he's always felt like Black women figure it out.
That's wonderful. I was going to say that I think maybe part of it could be the interracial families, which probably there are more of them now than they were then. So I think that would be a wonderful thing to have them come in and sort of understand. But you have 3 boys, so I could see that it would probably be helpful and easier for you to, I say minister, but, be a therapist to men.
Right.
But that's cool. I always say that I built my platform for Black women because I'm a Black woman, but I am open to helping everyone and listening to everyone because we all have a story to tell, but we have the culture and the background and the understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And what made me start my platform is because I couldn't find you when I had my first breakdown. And that bugged me because I went through so much racism and just disgusting behavior
Mm-hmm.
from a Russian therapist, a Jewish therapist, an Indian therapist. They were just very, very nasty, and they had no desire to learn my
Mm-hmm.
background and try to understand it. And a lot of Black people that we don't go to therapy as it is as much as we should, but they shy away because we're not there, and it is
Absolutely.
different.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with that? How would
So
talk to them?
in very early on, I'm trying to assess like what type of cultural, what from your culture is important that needs to be incorporated into therapy. And I've always gone into things with an open mind. I wasn't, although I am a woman of color, I was teased for being more like the white kids. So that was diversity in itself. And then my mom, she's
Right.
from the North and she was raised in New Jersey. So there was a whole melting pot of a community. So we don't have traditional Black people stereotypes, I guess. And so I
Right.
think that has helped me to be a very open-minded therapist. But again, from the very beginning, I'm asking in the assessment, like, what from your culture and religion or spirituality is important to you that needs to be incorporated into therapy. And if I don't understand anything, I let the client, if it takes one or two or even more than those sessions for them to help me to understand, for them to tell me about it and help me understand, I'm always open to that. I don't believe everybody needs therapy, but I believe everybody can benefit from therapy. And I don't want
Right.
anybody to ever feel like I don't want to see her because she just does not get it. I'm open to trying to get it. So,
And that's the difference with us and everybody else. We're always open to learning. We're always
mhm,
open to growing. And that's just not the feedback that we get, that we
mhm,
deserve, actually. So that's awesome that you would say that. I want to say that I'm whispering, all of my incidents happened in New Jersey.
wow,
Those instances with those therapists.
mhm,
But that's where I started my platform because I couldn't find a Black psych team. Not There were no psychiatrists, and there was
mhm,
one psychologist 30 to 40 minutes away. And
wow,
so, although we're not there yet, I'm so excited that there are more of
mhm,
us getting into this profession, even
absolutely.
more so your field, the therapy side of it, not the psychiatrist side, because of, like we were saying, that it's easier to help someone when you know their heart and know what they're going through.
Mhm,
Um, some therapists are very strict in their therapies, and I always, one of the funny things that I always say is, I hate DBT, I hate CBT, I hate the ABCs, everything. But there are some therapists that are, stick to their therapies. So what
mhm.
type of therapies do you use in your practice?
It's funny. I just had this conversation via TikTok yesterday, but I am a CBT therapist. But the way I implement CBT is very different than how it's taught by the book because the people who wrote the book don't have the problems that African American people have and other
Exactly.
people of color. And so
Right.
while I understand the concept of CBT to challenge the way you think and shift your perspectives, I'm not by the book. I'm not cookie cutter because our problems aren't cookie cutter. We don't have,
Exactly.
cookie cutter issues. Our issues are very diverse. And that's not to say that, white people's issues aren't diverse, but the people who wrote those books don't look like us. They don't have our influences. They don't come from our backgrounds. They may not have that multi-generational trauma. They just may not have had those issues. So again, while I understand the concepts of the CBT, the DBT, the family systems, I take that and center it or cater it to the child, to the actual individual.
I appreciate that because it drives me nuts. And I will say that my hate for it, I'm not going to say hate, but my dislike came from going inpatient a couple of times. And that's what they want to stick to. And I know my last inpatient stay, I was very vocal about the fact that you have to allow, some wiggle room, because we're all different. And that book and that DSM-5, that doesn't fit everybody. And I hate the DSM-5. That I can say I hate, but we still have to do it.
The symptoms, while the symptoms are the roadmap, they do look different in people of color. And so again, I mentioned how women, by the time they come to me, they feel like they're just failing in life. And they don't recognize that feeling of failure may be interpreted as a symptom of depression. But I'm always educating them as much as humanly possible because one, of the stigma in mental health. And so I will let them know that, you may come to me and I will interpret this symptom as this, and you can go to somebody else, a person of color or a non-person of color, and they may interpret this symptom as something completely different. And I think that is also part of the stigma that prevents people from coming to therapy is they have 5, 6, 7, 8 diagnoses. By the time they come to me, it's like, well, what you got? So I'm explaining that to help them feel comfortable. And I'm always open to include them in any type of, I'll bring it to their attention. Well, this symptom kind of sounds like this. So let's explore that more. But I just think it's, and I've gotten some flack about that. Like they don't need to be included. And I just don't believe that. I don't believe that they don't need to be included. They need to know what's in their file.
Right. And I would think that you would want to work with the psychiatrist that's treating that patient. And I'm not shocked because I've heard it like, oh, I'm not calling them, I'm not listening to them or whatever. And I'm like, well, if the psychiatrist is telling me that I have bipolar disorder and you're saying there's no way I don't, you're the professional. So you can explain to him why you believe I don't have bipolar disorder, which was one of my misdiagnoses. So what do you think is, and this is just your opinion, what has been the most successful therapy concept or type of therapy that you've used for, I'll say for women above the young adult age?
I would say that, so I've never used, like I said, one by the book method or methodology. So I always take, the ones that I am comfortable with and I incorporate the skills based on where the client is. So I can't say that there has been one that has been effective because I never just used one. But I think, I do love CBT just because it challenges the way you think and it opens up those perspectives to see things differently. And so that has been very successful. I'm not going to say the most successful because sometimes, clients just need a safe space and they don't need any of the ABCs. They just need a safe space to talk, not feel judged. And then because they have that level of support, they have a lot more confidence. They feel seen. So their confidence is increasing. They feel understood and heard. So, they're much more confident to make different decisions. And sometimes that's all it is. So I'm not going to say that there's one modality that works the best. I think it is a combination of, the ones that I use, which again is CBT, I use DBT, I've used acceptance and commitment therapy. But again, I'm centering it, catering it to the individual that I'm working with, and I'm meeting them where they are.
That's cool. What age group is the young adult phase starting?
So I prefer them to be 18 and up, and that is just because sometimes my experience has been parents want you to fix their children, and I just don't care to deal with parents when I'm trying to help a child go through their therapeutic journey. But I have taken some 16 and 17-year-olds, but I have a very intensive interview with the parent. And I just let them know, like, I'm not the therapist that is going to tell you what was said in the therapy session. I do let the child or the client communicate how they want to communicate. So if they curse, then they curse. If they call me, I won't be disrespected, but if they curse, and I'm not going to correct that. And so, I've had some challenges with that. Parents are like, well, no, I don't want you to let them curse. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to break the therapeutic bond to instill, your rules. And so, but typically I don't see anybody under the age of 18.
So I'll come back to that in a minute. But do you see a major difference in the behaviors prior to COVID and after COVID, as far as the young adults are concerned?
I've seen an increase in anxiety since COVID. With the population that I serve, the Gen Z population, I can't say that it's increased well, you know what? It actually has increased more since the new administration. But I can't, I can't say, I think they've just been much more vocal about it. I think it's always been there, but I think they've been much more vocal about it since COVID. And they're even more so, they're so socially aware. I don't remember being this concerned about what was going on in politics and what was going on around the world at their ages. And it's inspiring, but sometimes it's also the trigger.
Yeah. I see that there's a 7-year difference between my daughters. So, and so I even see the difference in just that small gap with the way they think. And my youngest, I always tell her that her classes are a little bit more rose-colored than I was at that age, especially at my age, when I was that age, because I was living in a totally different time. And like you said, we didn't have time for that. We had to get shit done. We didn't have time to think about it. And actually, I think we were kind of, I hate to say spoiled, but now I hate for people especially for people that are living with these mental illnesses, to have everything thrown at them 24/7. The news, the social media, and, I don't care what Neo, does when he's off screen, like stuff like that. We never knew that stuff.
Right.
Because the anxiety is much, much higher. But we'll go back to women now. So I am horrible at everything that you listed. My identity was mom, the PTA mom, the Girl Scout mom, the soccer mom. I was all of those things. I suck at self-care. I was the single mom in a 2-parent household. I grew up, I've been cooking since I was 7, taking care of everything since I was about 8. So how do you speak to that? I don't know how to change that. That's what I'm saying. And I know that there's so many of us with the superwoman theory that, Black women can do it all. Black women can save everything and everyone. And I don't know how to change those behaviors.
Well, at the point that the clients come to me, they know they want to change it. They just don't know how. And so we are starting with, what is the one thing? And sometimes it's that magic question. If you could change one thing, if I could grant you one wish, what would it be? And sometimes that is what identifies it. There are quite a few different techniques that I use to really identify, to help try to understand what the mother is really saying, what the woman is saying in my session or in her session. And from there, that's how I help them. So I've had mothers say, I've had some mothers say that, like, I think I was sold a dream and it's not a dream. And it's not, all that I thought it was going to be, being a wife and a mom. And I get that, because sometimes I feel like that is what we're sold. And so we're exploring like, well, who sold you that, and what were your expectations, and how are they different than what you're actually living? And then that gives us the path or the journey. For some, it's like I'm overwhelmed and I'm starting to resent my husband, and so that starts the journey. Maybe we need to identify some boundaries. We need to have some communication skills. Maybe you need to bring him into a session. It really just varies on what the client is saying at the point that they are on the other side of my screen.
I guess, yeah. That's a good approach. That really is. How about when you get women like me who have had extensive trauma coupled with, not knowing how to be the woman or, to change? How do you approach that challenge also?
So I think we have to deal with the trauma first and see how is the trauma impacting you today, because sometimes that is why you are reluctant to change. Sometimes people are so comfortable in their chaos that they don't want to step outside of it, even though they know that stepping outside of it would bring them more peace. But the chaos is predictable. I've navigated chaos all my life. I know how to do that. I don't know how to navigate peace. I don't even know how to be peace. I don't know how to cultivate peace. So that's a challenge. We have to explore, that mindset, that trauma. We have to work through that. And then I think one thing that keeps women stuck in this superhuman, superwoman mindset is feeling like the version of themselves that they want to be, whether it's soft or maybe it's just not so superhuman, is external, but it's internal. And the challenge is because they think it's external, they don't see anything that aligns externally with it. So they think it's impossible, but it's in here and then it's reflected outward. And so that is a lot of the work that we're doing too. Softness is an attitude. Femininity is an attitude. Bad bitch is an attitude. Strong Black woman, believe it or not, is an attitude. Mm-hmm. And we've done it because we've been told to do it, we've been conditioned to do it. And now our world aligns with that. And so again, it's multifaceted. You align with the strong Black woman, your world reflects that because that's what you think you are. And then we have all of the other stuff. And so it is difficult I can understand why women think that it's impossible to overcome. So.
It feels to me every day, it feels like it's impossible. And I have grown children, mm-hmm. and I'm here by myself, and I still can't give myself permission to feel certain things or to, go get a touch up or, do those things because, my mindset is, and I'm not the person that thinks that I should just be, soft or hard. Mm-hmm. I am the survival mode. I'm the one that's always in survival mode because of how I grew up. And it hurts me. It hurts me actually that I can't change that. And I've had the conversation with several women throughout the years that, like you said, we're so conditioned to be the superwoman. We're so conditioned to keep everything inside. We yell at Black men and say that they don't share, but we don't share either. We share to an extent. Mm-hmm. There's no one in this world who knows who I really am. Mm-hmm. And so when I leave your office, what would my homework be, so to speak? I know some therapists do give homework. I never got homework, but what would you share for them to look into?
So if you're telling me that you don't want to be strong anymore, I would ask you to identify, well, what does that look like? Again, women feel like it's black or white. If I'm not strong, I'm weak. And there is a world where two things can coexist and you get to create that world. So taking back your power, identifying what that looks like. Sometimes no longer being strong just means you don't work two jobs. So quit one. What do we need to do to get you to feel comfortable quitting that job? And I'm walking with you through the process. And for other people, it's aesthetic. Oh, for me to be soft, I gotta have the aesthetic. I have to have the nude walls and the nice wardrobe. And okay, so how do we get there? And so that, identifying what it is, but I think the biggest thing is deciding that that's what you want. Sometimes people feel like, oh, that's cute. That's it. Soft girl is in now. So I want to do that. I'm gonna jump on that trend. But if it's not what you really want, then why are we wasting each other's time? And I don't mean to, I'm not, I don't want to be insensitive, but I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want you wasting mine chasing a trend. Do you want to be soft or not? And what does that look like for you? Because it's going to look different for me, and it's going to look different for you. So to answer your question, it is really determining if that's what you really want. Because like I said, some people are so conditioned by their attitude of strong Black woman or Mrs. Survival or Mrs. Independent. And if that's who you want to be, fine. What do you really want to work on? If that's not who you want to be, who do you want to be? Define that person, identify that person. And the other thing is there will always be parts of you from every version that will still be beneficial to the new person you're trying to become. And I think society, social media therapists have convinced us, again, with that very Black and white thinking, that if you no longer want to be soft, you have to abandon everything you are now. And it's like, but I kind of like speaking up for myself, or I kind of like spending money on myself, or I kind of like whatever this masculine trait is, and I don't know if I want to leave that version of me, that characteristic of that version of me there. And so just sometimes hearing a therapist say, well, bring that part of you along, that's okay, because this is your definition,
Yeah.
So that's just I identify what that looks like.
Yeah, because we're so bullied. Women are bullies. I know that nobody wants to believe that, but we are bullies, especially late, with the 92% thing, which has been the loudest era of bullying that I've seen so far. It's supposed to be, we're supposed to be nice to each other and love on each other. But like you said, oh, you're not soft enough. Oh, you're not ignoring enough. We said that it was going to be 92%. We're going to sit back and relax, but we weren't going to forget what was going on in the world. Like, all of life is going on around us. There's no way in hell we can sit here and drink coffee all day and sort of shut down, what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I like that part also. And I love that you're saying that you give the client, the patient, the choice to come in and share. I never heard anyone in a professional setting say that it's okay to bring along all of those different, you can bring the hard to the soft to the hard. My last therapist was a Latina, and one of the best therapists that I've ever had. And one day she finally said to me, that you can be angry, right? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, it's okay to be angry. Because just because everybody calls you an angry Black woman doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Right. Like, anger is an emotion. You need to have anger. Sometimes anger pushes you to get it together, or pushes you to change, pushes you to action. So stop letting people convince you that the way you are is wrong. And that stuck with me for years.
That's why it's important that, for me, to tell the individual, to give them the power to define it themselves, because they typically end up in therapy because they like who they are and their surrounding doesn't, or their surrounding doesn't like who they are. Or I think I'm saying the same thing, but basically they like who they are and their environment doesn't, or they don't like their environment and their environment likes, they're struggling internally. They're negatively internalizing what everybody is telling them for whatever reason, because I'm comfortable with who I am and they're telling me I shouldn't, or I'm not comfortable with myself and they're saying that I should be. And so I give them the power. You tell me what this looks like. You tell me what soft girl looks like. Because it might not look the same for me. Soft girl for me might be taking a hot bath, and that's it. And for some other women, soft girl and femininity means they have a providing husband. Well, if that's not your reality, do you want to make it your reality? Or do you actually love your husband and want to stay with him? So how else can you be? But I don't think people understand that they have a choice and they have the power. So I like to empower them as much as possible. And I'm always telling them, like, I am the clinical expert, but you're the you expert. And together, working together is how we get you healthy. So no, I'm not sitting here telling you what you need to do or should do. I'm really not even giving my opinion. I'm helping you feel confident in your decision. I'm not telling you what to do. And they'll be like, well, can you just tell me this one time? No, but I can walk you through the decision and I can let you know if I support. Most of the times I am going to support it if you're comfortable with it. Now, if you're not comfortable, then I'm not supporting it because you're compromising yourself.
Right. I love that. I'm the clinical expert. You're the, you need t-shirts, girl, with that one. So how much of, and I know we talked about this in the pre-meeting, how much of you and your personal life influences what you do as far as your platform is concerned?
So I am my clients and my kids are the other. I am my population and my kids are the other population that I work with. So at the point, and that's typically true for most therapists. They are their own client in most cases, or research says. So at the point that I did, like I kind of shared briefly, or maybe not enough in detail, but at the point that I pivoted, I made the decision to pivot into private practice. I was an on-call after-hours social worker. I was also working another job. I'm a wife, I'm a mom, and I was drowning in all of the responsibilities. I also had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and I was trying to prioritize my health. And I always felt like I was in positions because of my roles where I had to choose one over the other. Like I could not have both. I couldn't enjoy going to the gym because I'm worried about, well, my kid, I feel like I'm taken away from my kids or I'm taken away from my husband. And so I ended up going to therapy and working through that. And then I felt like, well, I can't be the only person experiencing this. And so that's why that's the population I want to help. And with the Gen Z, both of my daughters actually had a hard time leaving for college. They enjoyed college. They went to HBCUs, and I think they've had great experiences. But leaving mom and leaving home and leaving Mimi and Papa was a difficult transition for both of them. And so I, again, realized that they can't be the only one having, such a hard time. They thrive, thank God, because of our village. But they did have that difficult time. And so they both, my baby girl more than my oldest one, went through really severe depression her freshman year, and we ended up making her come back home. And so that's why I kind of adapted that population as well. And thank God, she knew she didn't want to stay that way. And we got on a really good routine, and she went into religion and she explored her own religion. She actually became Buddhist. So that was exciting. And she's creative, and she was very intentional with her creativity. So helping other people, I think part of her difficulty was she felt like she wasn't prepared. And part of that was our fault. We sheltered all of our kids. And I was sheltered too. So I was just repeating what I saw. But as sheltered as I was, I think just being the oldest daughter, I became very independent, and because I became a mom at 17. But she had a hard time with that transition, and so that's why that is my other population.
My daughter, my youngest one, I won't say that her first sign of mental illness showed up when the first year in college, the first semester in college, but it took a dark turn her first semester in college. And I don't think that we talk about that enough. I think I've done one or two episodes on it, on that gap, because like you said, you sheltered your kids because that was how you were. I sheltered my kids because I wanted to be the opposite of what I was. I was very, like I said, cooking at 7, paying bills at 10, all of that stuff. So I didn't want that for my kids. So I overdid it. And, overdoing it sometimes is detrimental to their growth also. And but I'm proud of me and I'm proud of you because we see it, and we're, I don't want to say woman enough, but we're grown enough to admit that those are the steps that we took that, could have, that hurt our children. It's hard for me to say that because they're my babies and, I would never do anything.
But recognizing that. And that was the same with my oldest daughter, because I was a mom at 17, the most pivotal parts of her life, we were in, my childhood home. And so when I left that home and, went into my own adulthood, I allowed her to stay. And I thought I was making the right decision. But as an adult, when she got into adulthood, she felt like I left her. And it hurt to hear that because I thought I was doing the right thing. And, and a lot of times when the Gen Z population does come to me, that is part of their struggle is they are already, sometimes what triggers their transition into adulthood is realizing or questioning how they were raised and, no longer seeing their parents as superhumans or, superheroes, even recognizing that, no, you were strict and you possibly, took some opportunities away from me or you were abusive. My best friend's mom doesn't talk to her that way, that type of thing. And yes, I thought we had a good relationship, but my best friend's mom doesn't call her a bitch, things like that. And so, and now they're questioning everything from their childhood. So helping them work through that trauma. So.
Yeah. And it's hard to hear, that you contributed to their pain in some way, even if it's not a horrible thing.
Right.
It's still hard as a parent to hear that. Okay, two things that I want to touch on really quickly is you practice in, I think you said North Carolina, Virginia, DC, and Maryland.
Maryland and South Carolina. North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland, and Virginia. Yes.
Oh, Maryland and Virginia. Okay. This is going to sound really funny, but so I've lived in North Carolina. I am from New York. So I know that there is a huge gap and there's a whole different social gap bridge between the North and the South. And it's not a bad thing because, my family is also from Virginia and I lived in Charlotte for 12 years the first time, 6 years, do you see a major difference in the way that women handle themselves between the Northern and the Southern women?
I will say that, and I definitely don't want to sound stereotypical, but I will say that the women that I do work with that are in the Maryland, Metro DC, Virginia area are just much more direct about what they want out of life. And the women that I work with that are out of North Carolina and South Carolina, they know what they want, but they're not as direct or aggressive in making sure everybody else knows what they want or what their expectations are. And so that is the difference that I've noticed the most. And I will also say that some of the women that I work with from the North, they complain more often that people feel like they are angry. But that, that's not uncommon in any of the women. At one point or another, or multiple points, they have been identified as the angry, Black woman.
Right. That's so... You're amazing. I love the explanations. I'm sorry, but I really am. I'm getting excited because these are conversations and they're explanations that we need to hear that we don't hear. You know, these books aren't being written, and
Mhm.
you know they're using the big terms, and nobody has time for that.
Right.
And so I'm just so excited that you decided to share it with us. Um, Quickly, the autoimmune thing, and you don't have to say, you know, what you have, or I shared with you that I have
Mhm.
two. My daughter has one, and I
Mhm.
know that everybody is always talking about, oh, you know, did fibro just show up? Did lupus just show up in Black women? No, it didn't. We're just finally being diagnosed properly.
Mhm.
That's not even 100%.
Right.
Do you see that there is a major link between having an autoimmune disease and the depression, anxiety? You know, does one trigger the other?
Well, I definitely think that any type of health crisis could absolutely trigger some type of mental health crisis as well. I haven't seen a direct link between it. Now, I have had women who have shown up, and sometimes that is what triggers them. Is like they've gotten this diagnosis of PCOS or fibroids or fibromyalgia or lupus, and they're starting to lose their hair, or they're starting to experience some type of different, physical traits. And so that is what lands them in my chair. For me, it's called Behçet's, and it is very rare. I think I shared in our pre-call that it is so rare amongst Black women that my white gynecologist tried to tell me that's not what I had, even though the Black gynecologist in the office said that that's what that is. And so that was a moment, that was like a Black girl moment just for me, that she came in
Right.
and she was like, oh, that's that. And so what I have, like I said, is Behçet's, and it is not common amongst Black women, and it's not even as common in the United States. It's from a whole different country. And it is inflammation of the blood vessels. And so it's very difficult to get diagnosed because you don't have like symptom clusters that match. So because it's inflammation of the blood vessels, wherever my blood vessels get inflamed, that's where I have symptoms. So I just came off of vacation, and before we went to vacation, when I went to the urgent care, they tried to tell me I have sinusitis. I don't have sinuses. I've never had sinuses, but my sinuses were inflamed because that's where my blood vessels got inflamed, and I had the symptoms of sinusitis. So, and that's a frustration in itself, because I go to these doctors and I'm like, well, no, I don't have that. I just have the symptoms. I have this autoimmune disease, and this is what that is. And so my blood must be inflamed there. So, but thank you. And they feel like I'm telling them, their job, and it's like, well,
Right.
no, that's not what I'm saying. But I don't have that. I don't need to get on those sinus medicine. I just need a really strong dose of antihistamine, and you won't see me again. So, and so it is difficult, and I did grieve, the loss of my health. It was even more difficult for me because I am health conscious. I was raised that way. My mom walked and, changed our eating habits. We didn't eat red meat. Turkey and chicken, seafood, and no whole milk, things like that. So she didn't eat a lot of processed food. And I brought that into my adulthood. And so to think
Right.
I was doing everything right and still get sick, I struggled with that. And I was very physically active. I would work out or, move my body, take my kids outside, get the sunlight, all of the things. And I still got sick. So I went through not a deep depression, but I did grieve the loss of my health. And I grieved because of what they said the risks were, which was because of the inflammation of the blood vessels. Two of the highest risks is an aneurysm or a stroke. Well, strokes don't kill, but aneurysms do. Don't typically kill. And so just, worrying about that. And then I just had to say, like, well, I'm just not going to be a victim. I'm just not. I'm going to take ownership over my health, and I'm going to prioritize getting better. And that's when all of the other life changes came along. I left daytime hours and I got untraditional hours so I could have that break, and I could create me time, and I could prioritize working out, and I would have more time to cook meals. And I tried all the diets, vegan diet, inflammation diet, all of the things. And so it was a journey, but I haven't had a flare. I haven't had a major flare since 2019, I think. And I've been on medication since 2021.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Because I know I did look up what you told me that your illness was, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it again, but I did look it up because I'm always curious to hear, to read about these different things, because like you said, you go to the doctor and they just want to tell you what they think it is, or especially white male doctors, they don't listen to Black women at all. White female, doctors, I was told, yes, you have fibromyalgia. Yes, you have chronic fatigue syndrome. So we're going to do this, this, and this because your pain threshold is very high. And I had to have one doctor written up for that because she didn't understand that that's a stereotype and it's insulting, it's racist, offensive. And so, shut up and listen to what I'm saying. That's really what we have to say to doctors. I tell my daughter that all the time, both of them. Let them know, no, this is what's going on, not what you said.
Right.
We speak it for yourself. Let them know that they're not going to get away with half-assing you. And because having to fight for your health makes your health worse,
right.
And it's just really awful. And I'm so glad that you were able to get a diagnosis for something so rare. My biological father had myasthenia gravis. And when the first time that was the first time I had even heard of something like that. And then they had to send me for testing because I had some of the symptoms. And, as soon as I said, well, my biological father has myasthenia gravis, then they want to send you for these battery of tests. But it nobody has heard of that until now, and that's what I'm saying. We're not just being diagnosed, or it's not the catch of the day. We're learning what these illnesses are, and we're getting help for it.
Yes.
So that's an amazing thing. When you sign up on your website, you give away a freebie. Let us know what that is. And
so there may be several freebies at this point. I did create a self-care workbook, which makes self-care practical. It's not just, thing to do. And so that is, I think that is the freebie. And then there is an even more extended version if you really are ready to invest in yourself. And I think it's $19.99. But again, it's just more expensive. But still practical, because the thing is, if I'm telling you I'm depressed and I'm anxious because I don't take care of myself, I don't need you telling me I need to take care of myself. No, what I need you to do is help me to understand why I need to prioritize myself. I need you to help me figure out a rhythm that incorporates that. But just to tell me, I feel like it's kind of well, take this pill and call me in the morning type of mentality from the doctor. And it doesn't really get to the root of the problem. So the free version just, it gives you that, some of those tools to implement today, because there's the stigma from around mental health, but then there's also well, this has been working me for so long, why should I change it? And, and I'm not, if you're at that mindset, you're not ready to move forward, but I will give you this for when you are. So that's what that is. And I do, on my website, I also blog weekly, and I share therapeutic advice specific for the ambitious Black mom on my Instagram. The Gen Z I target through TikTok because that's where they are. But I give a lot of helpful information on Instagram for that population, and Facebook. And they're all the same handle, mentalwellnessccs.com. Or CCS, I'm sorry, Mental Wellness CCS.
I'm going to make sure that I have that information. And you're virtual also. Only virtual?
Yes, only virtual right now.
That's just wonderful.
And it really works for populations, honestly. You know, the moms, they don't, there are some moms who are waiting for me to get an office just because they want to, they're so invested now in their self-care that like they see therapy as that. But for both of the corporate mom, the ambitious mom, the entrepreneur mom, and then the mental load that even just attending a session can add. You know, I got to find somebody to watch the kids. I might have to take the kids. I got to make sure those kids eat. They might have homework. I don't want to take away from their homework because I got issues, you know. And so I just try to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah. And I thought that we would stick to that after the COVID, once they saw how well it worked for everyone. One of my sisters, my bestie sisters, she has to, be home full time to take care of her child. And they tried to get her to go back in the office. And she's like, no, I'm not. So you just have to find somebody else. It was working, but here again, these frumpy men telling us what to do. Okay, so you're virtual and you are, say your states again.
North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland, and Virginia. Okay.
Give us one of your favorite tips for everyone across the board, the ambitious woman, Black woman, and the teen or young adults.
I'll give my favorite quote. Whatever you think you can or you think you can't, you are right.
Thank you.
And I think that is my favorite because a lot of times the things that we are struggling with outside of trauma is very real, but a lot of the times the things that we are struggling with, we are keeping ourselves stuck there. We are putting the limitations, we are putting the restrictions, we are owning the judgments, we're owning the opinions. And if you keep doing that, if you're not open, even if you just open up your thinking, I tell clients, if you don't want to be happy, fine. Can we just explore being less upset? Can we explore being a little less anxious? I don't want you to go from all the way over here to all the way over here, but can we 0.1% of a step?
Right.
That's fine. Eventually you'll get here. And then the other thing is we think ourselves into a lot of these situations, a lot of these symptoms, which is why, in my opinion, which is why I feel like CBT is effective. So if you can think yourself into it, you can think yourself out of it. You know, if you struggle with anxiety and you overthink everything negative, you can overthink everything positive.
Right.
We don't go in that direction. And so whatever it is you think whoever it is, whatever it is you think you want to be, you can be. We just have to figure out what that looks like and how to make it happen. So,
thank you. And is there a specific book, a favorite book that you recommend to patients? I know that's a loaded question.
So many books. I would say that for Gen Z, the biggest, because most of the individuals that I see in Gen Z are thinking they are experiencing symptoms of anxiety. My favorite book that I've most recently read is Don't Believe Everything You Think, and that is by something Wynn, Joseph Wynn, I think. I think it's Joseph Wynn.
I know I have it in my cart, my library card.
I love that book. It's an easy read, and it really breaks down how our thoughts, how we think contributes to our own suffering. And it makes it very practical and understandable. And then I would say for the ambitious mom, I would say set boundaries, find peace. And I push that one even more because it's written by a Black woman. So she knows, I feel like she's very aware, even if that was never her experience. I think, it's just some things you cannot escape from our culture. And so, I think it's different when you hear a Black woman say set boundaries than when you hear Meg say set boundaries.
Yes.
I recommend that book.
Well, I am thrilled that you're here. I would love to have you on again. No lie. There are so many things that we talked about before that we didn't even get in this time. So you're coming back.
Okay.
I'm going to have you back. I I want to applaud you for the work that you do, because, and not just because you're a mom and a wife and the different things, but just because you took the time out of your life to bring light to us. And I get teary-eyed when I say stuff like that because it's just so rare, now. And I'm just grateful that you came on to share with our audience. I will put in your information, guys, everywhere. It'll be on my Instagram and everywhere. And you have to when you send me the email, send me the names of those 2 books so I can list them. But thank you so much for reaching out and for coming back on. I appreciate it so much.
I would love to come back. I would love to.
So my last question that I give everybody, I am a baker, and I always ask, what is your favorite dessert? As the last question.
Red velvet cake.
How did I know you were going to say that?
Well, you know what? I would say it's red velvet cake or banana nut bread. Those are my 2 favorite. Whenever I'm having a day and I need a treat, it's always one of those 2. I either go get a red velvet cupcake or I go get some banana bread with walnuts.
Wow. And I got some banana bread in the freezer to mail to someone right now. So I'll have to mail you some.
Yes.
But thank you again. Don't go away. And we're going to have you back on. Maybe during a round table, I do that sometimes, have a couple of people on at the one time. But thank you again.
No problem. No problem. I really allow me to be here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Well, guys, listen, I know that we may have gone a little longer than I'm used to, but it was worth it. And I hope that you guys take everything in. Listen to the broadcast 2-3 times. I know that at least one Black woman in your life that can resonate with what we were discussing today. And please stay peaceful. Please take care of yourselves. I'm always giving a lecture about the COVID coming on and whatever bug is going around. So please, guys, stay safe. And I will talk to you later. Bye.